looking at all these other kinds of things in the operating room is a big part of what we do right now, including team-based practice, interprofessional practice. So for interprofessional practice, what that really refers to is the fact that you're training as surgeons, nurses as training as nurses, RTs are training as RTs, lab techs as lab techs, etc. And then, for some reason, we think that we can isolate people in silos while we're training and then stuff them all into the same workplace and expect everything to work really well, right? All of a sudden, everyone's going to play well in the sandbox, although they didn't know what each other's roles were and how they can train to work together properly before. You've heard about that being the other way in the airline industry, where they train people as teams, so they understand what each other's roles are and they work well when they get together, right? Simulated crises and simulated rare events are big things these days, even at MAC and Toronto and at Queens right now, at Ottawa, practically everywhere. You've got people looking at how we train people in teams, right? Other things, curriculum design, right? So we're just putting together right now, we talked about this with a couple of the residents just now, we're looking at the thing called Foundations of Surgery for year 1 and year 2, which anyone here has probably gone through, right? And how do you make that better? How do you make sure that there's a high standard so that we have a baseline from which to start if you're a surgical resident? Teaching in general. So some of the work I do, teaching in the OR, again, how do we know what we're doing when we teach? And teaching administration, so how to deliver surgical education, how to grab people from medical school into surgery properly, how to make sure that that's really what they want to do and that you put that out in front of them, then choose the right ones, then shepherd them through this process in a good administration process. Right down to graduation. And new interest in surgical education is scholarship. There's a big renewed interest in that, as I said. As some of these leaders in medical education have put surgical education on the map, there's a renewed interest in it. Journals are now publishing a great deal in medical education, whereas they published the occasional paper before. So that's really coming forward. And there's acceptance for surgical education as a scholarly track. So Dr. Mudari is talking this morning about the fact that you need to actually make sure that something's moving forward. You talk with the right people, you get things done. Well, people are accepting this right now as a way to actually move forward within the university. And this worldwide cooperation, as I said, just if you think about the CanMeds part of things and CanMeds with surgery, there is so much interrelated work going on that isn't funny. So pros and cons of surgical education and research in a residency. I thought since there's some residency, we'll put a slide in here to tell you kind of where things are, right? First of all, the questions are of everyday relevance. These are really things you can think about that make a difference in how you learn and how you practice every day for 5 years of that key part of your life, right? And for a really good reason, because this is what you want to do for the rest of your life. It doesn't usually require specialized equipment, which is great. You don't have to buy anything for capital expenditures in your grant proposals. It's usually feasible and measured, so it's something we can actually get done and kind of keeps going on a pace that we can keep up with. It's quotable. So, for instance, one of the more popular papers, so you might have read a paper by Jennifer Martin from the University of Toronto. She actually wrote the first papers on objective structured assessment of technical skills, the OSATs. The first paper in OSATs was actually written by a resident. There are more than 200 high-powered citations on that one paper alone. Not one paper from UT by a resident. To say nothing of the thousands and thousands of other citations that you probably won't find in public. Precursor to tertiary care academic position. So Richard Resnick, for instance, just recently finished off as the chair of surgery at the University of Toronto. It's now the dean at Queens. So one of the things he moved forward in surgical education is that he expects someone to be well trained in a residency program, to have a fellowship where there's an area of clinical focus, and then to have something more. Now, perhaps he's a bit biased because he's also a surgical educator. That's his blood. But a lot of people at U of T right now have something like a master's in education and think of teaching and scholarly work in medical education as the added benefit to the university above and beyond the clinical focus, right? The trouble with it is there's not a plethora of staff supervisors right now, unless you're on University Avenue. And the infrastructure to make all this happen is still in development. So there aren't a lot of research assistants around the place who are very good at this yet. Let's take a quick look at, in the interest of time, let's go forward a bit. So why surgeons should think about qualitative research? So qualitative research is something that really is very well applied to the starting edge of the wedge, right? And in surgical education, that's a big thing. So it's on the cutting edge of medicine, including surgery. It's kind of coming up now, and it's where people are focusing as a new way of doing research. We haven't really done this much in medicine before. If it's well done, it provides persuasive evidence to change your practice, right? So if it's well done, meaning if you look at the science and adhere to the science properly, it makes sense that if this is going to be a changer, it's got good evidence behind it. And academic surgeons are expected to do research, but not everything has to be an RCT, right? I don't think I'm saying anything bad for the rest of this. So let's take a look at, so this is some of the work we've done. I'm just going to showcase this quickly in a few slides. I will go through things quickly, but you can ask questions later if you like. So myself, Dr. Matsumoto, and Dr. Zeli started putting this together with several residents. And our hypotheses were that residents have some similar and different emphases on teaching babies in the OR. Right? So surgeons and residents think differently what teaching should be like. The junior and senior residents probably value different parts of teaching, and that the surgeons probably also realize that, and they probably teach differently to the juniors and the seniors, right? Those things kind of make sense. That was our observation when we started. But we wanted to show whether that really was true or not, because there was nothing in the literature. Remember I said this is a wide open field, right? Nothing in the literature about this to start with. Our methodology, we use focus groups. And we used 3 to 6 participants. I had never done a focus group before. I had no idea what it was. We had to come up to speed with all this and get some good research background to help us. We audio recorded it, used notes. We had 40 residents and 40 staff, so this is a massive project. And we sought staff from all 4 McMaster sites. And then we used thematic analysis. So thematic analysis means we looked at the literature to find out what some of the themes were, what some of the real important things in this area of research already were, and we built on top of that. So it's emergent in that we take some of the stuff, we look at how it goes together within this project, and we also try to bring up new themes that we find out from this project, right? We put it into a database, which really is like a spreadsheet for qualitative research. And then we reread things, look for what the important parts are. For instance, what are the concepts that are coming through that people are talking in this session, in that session? How did it get discussed? What did that really mean in the end? As you look through the discussion, you're charged with finding the important parts and putting them together, right? We collated those things and collaborated and compared them until we got down to the essence of what was being talked about. And the results really were these. There are actually multiple concepts in teaching that are interwoven to provide good intraoperative teaching, right? So things like managing the environment. People knew they were doing this, and they were very, very, very vocal about the fact that they have to make sure the environment's okay for the teachers. That they're managing their own distractions, because surgeons sometimes are tired, and they have to put that aside to teach well. They motivate the learners. This is something that many of the surgeons talked about, but they didn't realize that they were actually doing it until we brought it up. That's the point. There was a point in the literature when we brought it up. Then you start realizing, well, I do this and this and this and this, and it turned out it was probably one of the biggest, most important things that surgeons do in the operating room, was to motivate the learners. I'm not sure you knew that. That's really a powerhouse. They provide appropriate feedback, which is something we all accept as a sine qua non of surgical training. Provide feedback. Am I doing this right? Am I doing it wrong? Right? And they model good surgical practice and professionalism. Or, if they're doing it wrong, bad surgical practice. Right? They model that pretty well. So, what came out of this? Multiple international workshops. We've had this all over the world so far. We put multiple podium presentations together, local and international. There's some papers in the press right now, multiple others in the works, and we've had significant faculty development workshops here at McMaster and going forward from there. Right? So again, you can see that what we started off with, change leads to research, which leads to change, which leads to research. Right? So for instance, laparoscopic surgery. Back in 1992, when I was a clinical clerk, people were doing 4-hour lap choles for normal, like biliary colic gallbladders, right? The ones that had no adhesions. 4 hours, because the stuff was so bad and no one really knew what to do. They were like these funny port things, right? But then within 2 years, that completely changed. So by the time I was an intern, in my at the end of my intern year, nobody was booking an open gallbladder unless they absolutely had good reason to do so. A complete 180, right? From all open to all laparoscopic unless it's absolutely necessary. That was the practice. Then we started realizing, well, how are we going to teach this? This is new for us. How are we going to teach this better? Well, let's get all these box trainers. Let's try this. Let's try models. Let's try this. There are trainers sitting in the OR hallway outside at St. Joe's where I train, where you can go and stuff some ports in and play with things and try to practice, right? And then that research then lead to new ways of teaching. So we now have fundamentals of laparoscopic surgery. So those of you who are in general surgery will know fundamentals of laparoscopic surgery is a course you now have to take if you expect to become board certified in the US. Right? I think it may be at Royal College too, but I'm not sure if it's gotten there. So who should do surgical education research? Anybody. It doesn't really matter, right? Get yourself some background. If you're interested in the field, there are people you can latch on to get this done well. And the biggest thing is, I'm sure you've heard this before, is having an educational question. Right? So the two parts to really get that done, number one, interest, and number two, opportunity. If you have the interest to get this done, the second thing is to find the opportunity or make the opportunity happen. And then to develop your team, to get your team together for this. Once you do that, you're on your way. Well, as long as you can keep your team cohesive, because medical education research usually doesn't happen with a single investigator. So the future, where do we go from here? Well, Niels Bohr said prediction is very difficult, especially if you're predicting the future. Right? Very smart man. But the thing is, the need's tremendous. The need's amazingly tremendous. We've done nothing about this for hundreds of years, right? So now the backlog of how we do things really well is upon our shoulders. We really have to move this forward. The field is expanding, so the more we know, the more we find out we should know, and the better we find that the standards are, the more work we have to do. The impact is great, so once you make a change, once you find something out, you can make a change that ripples throughout medical education. This is 2012, this is 2011, sorry. I'm already into the future. This is 2011, and what happens is if you make a change, if you have something that's interesting, everyone knows about it right away. The impact is really huge. And the work's very satisfying. So as somebody who is doing medical education research, I'll tell you that the things we found out are kind of mind-blowing. It's like, wow, we can change the way people actually do things. We can bring things forward that people knew that they weren't really aware they knew of, right? So we've been running along with this, doing good things, bringing out or training good surgeons, but not really knowing how we've done it. But the time is here now to make this a much more quality-based process and a much more transparent process with a good lot of accountability as the public wants from us. And I think that's kind of where things are. So just in closing, just to get through this, we looked at a bit of surgical education. We've looked at some rationales for surgical education research. We looked at what surgical education research really is about. I put SurgEd here because now you know what SurgEd is about, right? So short forms. And we looked at how change drives research, which drives change, which is going to happen in practically everything else you see, right? Not just lab coatings, but practically every new technological advance. And looked at a quick example, so you kind of have an idea of what this might be in terms of qualitative research projects. And a little bit of what you need to do next if you want to do surgical education research. So there's surgical education, I hope, with enough flavor and just enough detail to not bore you, but to hopefully entice you to say, I'm interested in this, now I kind of have an idea of where to go. Thank you very much.